Hello and welcome to Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us. This morning we'll replay some of Monday evening's interview segments with Governor Tate Reeves and his election opponent, Brandon Presley. Much of these discussions focus on the mudslinging that has become a signature of the 2023 gubernatorial campaign. Today we're going to fact check some of the attacks that each candidate has hurled at the other. We'll also get some pre-election analysis from Brandon Jones and Austin Barbour. It's campaign coverage that you can count on from 12 News, your local election headquarters, and Mississippi Insight. Over these last few days leading into Tuesday's general elections, the gubernatorial candidates have stayed busy with attack ads and allegations of wrongdoing against each other. This morning, we'll break down Presley's and Reeves' accusations against each other in their own words in our one-on-one candidate interviews, and then we'll check the facts on those allegations and put them into proper context. First, here's Republican incumbent Reeves explaining why he is calling the Democratic Public Service Commissioner a lawbreaker. And you've alleged Brandon Presley of breaking Mississippi campaign finance laws as public service commissioner over campaign contributions he received from energy producers, including Silicon Ranch. Have you filed a campaign finance violation complaint over these allegations?
Look, the fact of the matter is that there have been 3 public service commissioners in the last 30 years in Mississippi that have gone to prison for exactly what Brandon Presley has done. It's a fact. The law is clear. Brandon Presley knows the law, and he's chosen to break it. Anyway, he is a hypocrite, and I think the voters of Mississippi are seeing that as well.
The way the law reads today does not define such energy producers as public utilities themselves, and all 3 current public service commissioners, including 2 Republicans, have all accepted campaign donations from these energy producers that had dealings with the PSC. Now, would you pursue or sign potential legislation to redefine what public utilities are to include these energy producers?
Well, the law actually does say that if you produce energy, you are an energy producer. What my opponent is trying to say is that because he defined them as something other than an energy producer, they therefore must not be. The law is clear. 3 public service commissioners in the last 30 years have gone to prison for doing exactly what my opponent has done, accepting this money from these green energy producers, these green energy businessmen. They've gone to jail, and they've gone to jail because they've broken the law. Brandon Presley's broken the law. He knows he's broken the law, and that's just a fact.
Just as your campaign attempted to go after Presley with attack ads of these contributions, his campaign has sought to go after you by connecting you to the welfare and fraud scandal. You have sometimes direct and indirect to some of the key players, including your former boss, Phil Bryant, and Brett Favre. You fired Brett Pygott as the leader of the state's civil suit. Why should your office control who leads the state investigation on this case?
Well, what I would tell you is if you look at the details, as I'm sure that you have, Byron, every single one of these allegations regarding misspending on welfare has occurred between 2014 and 2019. You'd have to believe in a time machine to believe that I was involved in those decisions. The fact of the matter is I became governor in January of 2020. My opponent knows that is true, but here's the reality. My opponent will say anything that the operatives from the Democrat National Committee ask him to say. They are spending millions and millions of dollars in our state spreading lies that the people of Mississippi know better, that Brandon Presley knows better. And the question that you should ask yourself is, why? Why are these liberal billionaires from California, New York, Massachusetts, and D.C. spending millions of dollars in Mississippi? The answer is simple. They're doing it because, not just because they want to change the governor, they're doing it because they want to change Mississippi. And it's imperative that all of us as Mississippians go to the polls in a couple of weeks on November the 7th to say we're not going to let these liberal billionaires from out of state come in here, tell lies, and then try to enact liberal policies in our state. They don't want Mississippi to be successful. They don't want Mississippi to have the success that we're having right now. And that's the reason they're spending millions of dollars here. It's not charity. Liberal billionaires from California are not investing millions in the Mississippi governor's race for charity. They're not doing it because they like my opponent. They're doing it because they don't like the conservative policies that we've enacted in Mississippi.
They also say that your brother served as an intermediary between Favre and the state auditor's office. What do you say to suggestions that such ties indicate your conflict of interest in this case?
Well, my understanding is that he was involved in trying to get the money repaid to the state. The fact of the matter is we are suing those individuals that received monies that they should not have received. We are leading the effort to actually recoup those monies, and that's a voluntary lawsuit. We didn't have to do that. We are suing these individuals trying to recoup 100% of the money that was spent in Mississippi that should not have been spent, that occurred before I became governor. Look, even the press has said that my opponent's allegations are false, that they're dishonest, that they are half-baked, because they are. Because again, he will say anything to try to take away from his liberal policy ideas and the direction that he wants to take Mississippi.
And that's Governor Tate Reeves speaking with us on October 24th. Let's back it up a bit. The governor continues to claim that Commissioner Presley broke the law by accepting campaign donations from a public utility. But the contributions in question, including the solar power company Silicon Ranch, do not appear to fit the definition of a public utility in Mississippi. Many produce energy and sell that production to clients, including utilities, but they don't sell that energy directly to consumers as public utilities do. Mr. Reeves insists that state law bars the commissioners from taking campaign money from energy companies, but he failed to point out which law that might be. Further, as far as we can tell, the Reeves campaign has filed no complaints with the Secretary of State's office or any other agency over his allegations against Presley. We also heard Governor Reeves defending himself against Commissioner Presley's own allegations that the incumbent is directly involved in the TANF fraud scandal. Here's Mr. Presley talking with us on October 27th.
Exhibit A in the case that Tate Reeves is center to the state public corruption scandal is the fact he fired the independent investigator in this case. Once that investigator got too close to Tate Reeves' buddies, once he got too close to Tate Reeves' campaign contributors, he wakes up one day and Tate Reeves fires the independent investigator. That's Exhibit A. Then we know that his brother, Todd Reeves, was text messaging back and forth with Brett Favre, acting almost as a public relations agent during this period. And the governor himself, and John Davis, who's going to spend 34 years in the penitentiary, said that Tate Reeves himself inspired the $1.3 million that went to Tate Reeves' personal trainer. The governor has been the chief cheerleader of corruption in this state for a long, long time.
But the governor argues that he had nothing to do with anything. He has not been charged with anything. So what makes you say that he still has his hands in the cookie jar, so to speak?
I think the fact that he fired the independent investigator in the case, he's never answered as to why he did that. Why would you fire someone that is independently investigating the case? Secondly, we know again that his brother was sending text messages back and forth with Brett Favre and others related to this, and the governor, John Davis, who is now facing 34 years in the penitentiary, said that the governor inspired the payment of $1.3 million to his own personal trainer. I think those are three sets of evidence that show that he's at the center of this controversy and that he has delayed, by firing that investigator, he has delayed 13 depositions indefinitely. Most recently, the Reeves administration agreed to keep Brett Favre's testimony in the case, his deposition in the case, confidential at first until after the election, or keep it confidential, and now to keep it confidential and not take it until after the election. They know that they're hiding the true facts in this case, and at the end of the day, I would not be surprised if we don't see more and more people ensnared in this investigation, and Tate Reeves is at the center of it.
Do you believe voters care enough about what happened with TANF and the welfare scandal that will make a difference in your campaign?
Oh, I believe that voters are mad about it. They know that $77 million was taken from jobs programs, education programs, programs that were designated for the poorest among us, and given for things like a volleyball court that Brett Favre wanted that was $5 million and $1.3 million diverted to the governor's personal trainer. Vehicles were bought, steak dinners were bought, all types of corruption were seen in that $77 million. And yes, I think voters are not only concerned about it, I think they're ticked off.
Speaking of ads, can you address the one directed at you regarding your time with the Public Service Commission? Governor Reeves contends that you knowingly broke the law by accepting money from a utility under your purview.
Well, the governor is full of lies, and his ads are full of lies. And the best evidence of that is the fact that once he was threatened with a lawsuit over that ad, he changed the entire facts of the ads. He knows that it's a lie. He's trying to deflect from his own time as being the chief cheerleader of corruption in the state, and he's just making up lies.
He says two people went to jail doing the same thing that you've done and you've done wrong.
He knows the facts of that case is completely different, and he knows his ads are a lie. That's the reason that once he was threatened with a lawsuit by one of the companies involved, he changed the ad immediately. He knows that he's telling lies.
Does the PSC have a right to decide what constitutes a public utility and what does not?
Well, it's clear that the companies involved in his allegations are not public utilities. That's been recognized for well over 20 years. The state law recognizes that, and he is just simply making up this to try to deflect from his own public corruption and the fact that he's been involved in the state's largest public corruption scandal.
Governors accuse you of taking a lot of outside money from national Democrats from California to New York and everywhere else, that this isn't Mississippi. How do you respond to that you're not really doing the work of Mississippians?
Oh, well, I'm from a town of 1,906 people in northeast Mississippi. I'm as Mississippian as you can get. I would point out that the governor's only candidate in this race still running his campaign funded by those who have been carted off to jail in the state's largest public corruption scandal. He still runs his campaign today on funds that he received from Zach and Nancy New that he promised to return, and he's never returned them. So we're not going to take a lesson on campaign finance ethics from a guy that still runs his campaign on dollars that were taken from people that are carted off to jail.
There's a lot to unpack with the commissioner's accusations as well. First, Governor Reeves himself said last week that he chose another legal team to pursue the state's civil suit over TANF funds because they had more resources to bring to bear than Brad Pygott did. Secondly, neither Governor Reeves nor his brother face any criminal charges in the TANF case, and neither is a target in the state suit. Tate Reeves' involvement in the case centers partly on a text chain between him and State Auditor Shad White. According to MississippiToday.org, Tate Reeves facilitated repayment of some of the funds received by former football star Brett Favre. What's more, it was John Davis who claimed that he was inspired by the governor to funnel $1.3 million into Paul Acosta's fitness program. Davis is one of the main defendants in this case. He is the former Human Services chief who pleaded guilty to state and federal charges of conspiracy, fraud, and theft for his role in the state's biggest welfare fraud scandal. His allegations against the governor have not been proven. Presley and Reeves did talk about plenty more than each other in our candid interviews. We'll get some analysis when Mississippi Insight continues. Last Monday, we brought you our own candidate interviews with Governor Tate Reeves and Commissioner Brandon Presley in full. You can find those interviews online at WJTV.com. And we got some expert analysis with Republican strategist Austin Barbour and Democratic strategist Brandon Jones. We just heard from Presley and we heard earlier from Reeves. Let's start now about Austin. Talk a little bit about what you heard in this interview, and particularly from the governor, about the economy and that we have momentum.
Yeah, and I think momentum is key here. People are going to watch these debates or long interviews or what you want to call them, and they're going to look at the candidate and say, how does he look? What's my impression of them? And I do want to start, I thought the governor looked confident. I thought he looked great, sounded great, and particularly when he talked about what's important here in the closing is the momentum that Mississippi has, both on jobs in the economy and education. I want to make sure I get this right. In 2022, so just last year, they set a record of $6 billion of investment across Mississippi. It's a record for the state, including 1,000 new jobs that have an average of $100,000 per job in the Golden Triangle. I think that's a big deal. Obviously, when you poll issues, jobs in the economy is always number one, no matter what race you're polling. And I thought the governor sounded really good on that.
Your thoughts on what the governor's saying?
You know, what we heard the governor talk about are issues that have pretty broad bipartisan support. I think the question that Presley's trying to raise is, do we want to make this an economy that works for everyone? There are people who aren't a part of this economy. There are people who are still struggling at minimum wage. There are people who can't afford health care, which is a huge issue in this state. And so the question is, do we want to do some of these things to incentivize people to invest here, but do we also want to make it an economy that works for others? We have the highest grocery tax in the country, and you heard him say we have very high car tags. So these costs, the way that it works for the individual, It's not an economy that's working for everyone, and I think that's what the issue is in this race.
When we talk about taxes, Presley wants to talk about the car tax and the grocery tax, and the governor wants to eliminate the income tax. So where is that going to stand, and how is that going to resonate?
Well, I think, Austin and I have talked about this before. What the governor is describing as a regressive tax structure, it's something that favors a select few. It's something that really doesn't work anywhere that it's been tried. What we need is a system that, again, is fair and that works for everyone.
Also on the taxes?
Under Tate Reeves' leadership, we had $1 billion in tax cuts. And if you look at the dollars that are coming in, state revenues, they're expanding every single year. I should use the word growing every single year. And I do want to point out that personal income tax since 2020 is up $9,000 a person. That's a big deal. And listen, voters vote with their pocketbook. Jobs in the economy and education are two big issues, and I thought Tate Reeves did a good job talking about those tonight.
When we talk about to expand, it's to expand or not to expand. That's the question here when it comes to Medicaid and not. Whatever side of the issue, or how much is that going to play in this election that we're going through, Austin, when we talk about Medicaid expansion?
I mean, it's always an issue because that's an issue that Brandon Presley has wanted to talk about. That's an issue that the Democrats are talking about. But what Tate Reeves has been able to do, he has worked with hospital leaders, big hospitals, rural hospitals, community hospitals, all across the state. They came out with a tremendously popular, big deal. I think it's $700 million, just under $700 million of new dollars that are going to come into the state that are going to help support these hospitals that have been struggling. Not just big hospitals or small hospitals, but all throughout the state. And we have got to make sure that we are improving and expanding access to health care in rural Mississippi, and having a strong hospital in a small community or a big community is a great way to do this. And this new finding of, it's not $1 billion, I want to get the number right, about $700 million, that's a tremendous boost to hospitals throughout the state, Brandon.
And Brandon Presley's his fight for Medicaid expansion?
Expansion is working throughout this country, in Republican states and Democratic states. It's not Democrats who are bringing this up, on their own. Republican governors have passed this. Presumptive House Speaker Jason White has brought it up. Delbert Hosemann ran on it 4 years ago. I mean, this is not some type of leftist idea. It's something that makes financial sense. What you won't find one penny of in that program that the governor talked to you about is additional health insurance for working people. Mm-hmm. This is a patch to a hospital system that is at risk of failing, and not any answer for people who still are using emergency rooms like their doctor's office. And until we address that problem, it's all smoke and mirrors. We have got to find a way to cover the 230,000 working Mississippians. You hear the governor frame it as welfare. That is a disgrace. That is offensive to people who are working throughout this country that are getting the benefit of Medicaid expansion, millions of Americans. And 230,000 Mississippians are struggling and facing financial peril because, again, they have to use the emergency room like the doctor's office.
Talk about the negative campaign. Both candidates are attacking each other when it comes to this campaign on the TANF and on Presley receiving money. How much is that going to play into what's going on here? Do voters really care about those issues when it comes to the negative campaign, Austin?
Voters do care about negative campaigns. They do, because they're constantly surrounded by the TV ads, the digital ads. People knock on their doors, handing them a flyer, and sadly, negative campaigns sometimes do work. They do catch the attention of voters. There is a sort of a fine line where you don't want to do too much or be too overly negative. But the issues in this race that matter, again, are going to be education and the economy. And those are the issues that I think I know Tate Reeves has led on and has a tremendous record for him. And I think when voters look and they have to make that final decision when they go to the polls, they're going to say, what are the issues that really matter to me, my wife, my children? And it is how much money am I making? Do I have the opportunity to go get a new job? And what's the quality of the education that my child or my grandchild is getting right now? And I think Tate Reeves is winning on both of those.
Brandon?
Well, I actually think the campaign's going to be about corruption in this state, which we are a state that's had unbelievable corruption. I mean, $77 million of money intended for the poorest Mississippians that find its way into friends of highly connected people. That is tremendous, and that's the reason you keep hearing that being talked about. And by the way, our government has done nothing to address that. We have not passed a single bill to make that less likely to happen. And nothing that's come out of this administration has made it less likely to happen again. And so, of course, you're going to talk about that. Medicaid expansion matters to 60% of voters in Mississippi, so naturally that matters too. And then having an economy that works for everybody, I think those three things are on the ballot.
All right, we got a quick, about 60 seconds here, real quickly. What are we going to see in this last stretch, this last 7 days to go before voters go to the polls?
Okay, I think specifically, since we're sitting here in Jackson, Mississippi, crime is a big issue that has not gotten a lot of attention, but I think that it will. 10 more seconds on this. Crime's a big issue in Jackson. Tate Reeves has made it a big priority during his tenure as governor, expanding Capitol Police to help, fight the crime that we have here in Jackson. Jackson voters, I think that's a big issue that hasn't come up a lot, but I think it will these last few days.
Brandon?
Brandon Presley is a person who has lived the Mississippi experience. His lived experience is one of calamity. It's been one of financial hardship. He knows what working Mississippians are going through, and I think that connects on a very deep personal level.
All right, lots more to talk about. Of course, we'll be talking about it more throughout the next few days. Thank you very much. Brandon Jones and Austin Barbour, thank you for joining us. We'll be right back for a few more minutes after this. If you're looking for information on Tuesday's elections and where to vote, etc., then check out Vote 411 online. This service by the League of Women Voters allows you to make your voting plan, check registration, find out who's on the ballot, and much more. The address is vote411.org. We're back in a moment. Thanks for joining us this week. We hope to see you at the polls Tuesday. Watch 12 News Tuesday evening for election coverage as votes begin to come in. I'm Byron Brown from all of us here at 12 News. Make it a great weekend.